Great. So welcome everybody to the staff round on Wednesday, the 17th of November. So you will, I guess, never expect to see an advertisement for a drug like aspirin or metformin because they're so cheap that they sell themselves. And there's a list of essential drugs for any healthcare system on the World Health Organization list of essential medicines, which I'll talk about in a minute. Okay. But basically, one of the problems of generic drugs is because they're so cheap, if we find a new indication and want to do some expensive research on it, there is no support for that because, of course, we're in a consumer society. So very surprised to see this advert, which has been on the back page or inside pages of the BMJ every single week now for a year, including this week, okay? And it's lithium carbonate, which is a very cheap salt, really. And it says here, are in full supply and readily available. So that makes it sound like there must be a shortage. And so if you look at the small print of the advert, you'll see that the price has gone up quite a lot. So lithium carbonate is one of those drugs that is on the World Health Organization list of essential medicines for any healthcare system. Okay, essential, and they've done a lot of work as to what the world really needs, and this is one of those drugs. So if you look at the small print of this advert, you will see that it says lithium carbonate for 100 tablets, £87. Now that's not cheap, and so I thought that's a bit peculiar. So let's look into this a bit further, and you'll find there are two entries in the BNF for lithium carbonate. One of them is Priadel, notice made by Essential Pharma for £7.50. And on the next page, also made by Essential Pharma, but others, the same drug, slightly different dose, £87. So that's a bit peculiar, I thought. Okay, and it's why they're advertising the more expensive one if the cheap one is still available. And the answer is that Essential Pharma have basically bought the patent to the cheap Priadel, and they've now announced it's going to be discontinued. They announced this last year that in April 2021, it was going to be withdrawn. Discontinuing production of the medicine, and the MHRA are telling us, just to let you know, that it's going to be withdrawn. No question about the ethics of it. They're just telling us. And this is the MHRA. So Essential Pharma informed, because they have to inform the MHRA of the discontinuation. And then the MHRA just send this alert to everyone saying, by the way, Priadel's going to disappear. And that's the end of it, okay? And except that, there's a new one that's 10 times more expensive being advertised. So I thought I'll write to various people, including the CMA, and the CMA threw my letter in the bin, I think, because the psychiatrists also wrote and said, this is not ethical. And the CMA were asked to investigate it because, of course, clearly there's a pricing issue, okay? And so the DHSC had to Essential Pharma inform them that they were going to reverse their discontinuation of Priadel while they were looking at pricing issues, okay? But they still have an intention to discontinue it, and they still have this advert in the BMJ every week telling us that this is always going to be available. So, of course, if you know about lithium, you'll know that what we don't need is a change in dose or change in prescription because it's one of those drugs that you need to take regularly. So they're trying to scare us into the more expensive drug, I presume, but also they are probably going to successfully withdraw Priadel, provided the CMA don't give them a hard time. Now, I'll come back to that, but there are many other drugs in this boat, okay? And the other one I want to talk a bit about, which I've put out in the advert for this, is insulin. Now, Frederick Banting, when he discovered insulin, he sold the patent for $1 to the University of Toronto. And the aim was, of course, that there would be no profit in it, his aim. But if you surf the literature, you find that there's plenty of evidence, including carefully done studies of costings in the BMJ Global Health, that suggest that the NHS is paying 5 times as much as it should. So the cost of insulin for a year should be about $100 internationally. And in the UK, we pay $500. But in the US, so we're quite lucky really, it's $1,200 per person. And of course, if you can't afford it, I mean, we're lucky in the NHS, then you don't get it or you ration it and you keep having DKA. So there are various action groups on this, and one of them is Type 1 Diabetes International, and they have pointed this out as well, that the aim was that we were going to celebrate. We're now 100 years into having insulin, and we can't really celebrate because half the world haven't got enough insulin because of the cost of it. And they've actually laid the blame at three companies, Eli Lilly, Sanofi, are the two big ones, okay, and Novo Nordisk in Europe, in Denmark. And they are basically keeping the price up. They're not stopping anyone making it, but for some odd reason, maybe because it's difficult to make, or so they say, but I'll show you evidence that this is not the case, that it's difficult to make, and therefore if anyone comes into the market, they will lose because the companies that make it just cut the price and prevent us from making any profit in it. Anyway, we are lucky because in the USA it's a much bigger problem because 25% of Americans have rationed their insulin because of the cost. Okay, that's really terrible because they are at risk of not just DQ, but all the complications of diabetes. I'm going to go to a few other drugs, and this is one that one of the pharmacists here, Victoria Latham, she knew I was doing all this work with different drugs, and she said, "Are you aware that there's something strange?" Well, she told me that the price of the capsules, which was very cheap, they were being withdrawn in the same way that the threat for lithium was. And here you go. So you look in the BNF and you find that it's a very cheap drug, okay, £3.31. You turn over the page and the same drug, £147.37. So I thought, right, I've got some contacts now with NHS England and NHS Improvement. So I've been working with hydrocortisone, which I'll tell you about at the end of this. And so I thought I'd email them. I met all the people that I knew in NHS England, and I titled it, this is it, only a month ago, Haloperidol is an essential drug. And I just said to all of them, are you aware about this haloperidol pricing? It's come to our pharmacy's attention that the cost of haloperidol 500 is considerably higher than the discontinued capsules, and it's going up from £2 to 147. And our trust will have to pay an extra 20k. And my normal question, as you can imagine, is why can't the NHS negotiate a sensible way forward for these essential generic drugs? And we're struggling financially, I said, to see what they said. Okay, so this is NHS England, NHS Improvement. So this is their reply, okay? Quite remarkable, really, okay? From NHS Improvement, thank you for your email. Our understanding is there's only a single supply of haloperidol, and while other suppliers are exiting the market due to low demand. And the key line is, this is not, this is my highlight, this is not a very commercially attractive product. Okay, it's quite astonishing. And then they also waffle. And then they say, we've identified that if haloperidol solution is used, then it will only cost 2 pence per dose compared to 250. So we've now got to start using the oral solution because of the cost. I mean, that sounds ridiculous. Okay, but that's their solution. Okay, and there's no thought about trying to keep the price down. They seem to be on the side of industry, and industry have sold them the statement that it's not commercially attractive. Now, haloperidol is also on the World Health Organization list of essential medicines, which I thought I should point out to them. And they do quite a good job. They look at why the indications are there. You'll notice that the patents have expired in all areas, so it's a very cheap drug to make, really. Okay, there's no patent. And they do a whole lot of expert reviews and they say, this is a drug that the world really must have. On top of that, I found this paper from Canada, and I'll summarize this abstract in this right-hand bit here. So in 2015, there was a supply problem in Canada, and they ran out of haloperidol, okay? And they had a big increase in people going to hospital for psychiatric problems. And their conclusion here is these results call for a more vigorous and coordinated reaction from a healthcare authority to avoid such situations. So I thought, I'll send them that. So I wrote to NHS, the person who replied to me, NHS Improvement. And I said, thank you for the reply. NHS England and Improvement surely have to NHS patients as well as keeping industry happy because they're saying it's not commercially viable. And so I said, while it's not commercially attractive, it's on the World Health Organization list of essential medicines, and I sent them to that link. And then I pointed out this paper that said these results call for a more vigorous and coordinated response from people like her. Okay, and then I said, this is unethical, basically. Allowing company to discontinue drug deemed essential by WHO means we'll lose the infrastructure, we'll lose the supply chain that currently exists, and it'll be really expensive to start again and find new manufacturer and go through all the approvals needed. Then I said, it's all about saying they can use syrup, but this is one of the most widely used antipsychotics, and it's also used in dying palliative patients. So demand isn't really low. And then I said, and this is the key bit, if no company finds this commercially attractive, can the NHS take over this drug with a current licensed manufacturer? Okay, because we're observing a problem for mental health patients unfolding, and it's not ethical to just let it happen. I said this on the 10th of October. So there was a 2-week gap. And then 2 weeks ago, this reply, which is even more astounding. Okay, it is, thank you for your email. We note your important points. And then they talk about competition. And I've had this discussion with lots of people in the past. Okay, we rely on competition to keep prices low. And it basically means that we are doing really well in the UK overall generically. However, there are some products, usually with a small volume, where there is no effective competition. And there's lots of those, I can tell you. And then they say the CMA will sort them out. Okay, the Competition Market Authority will tackle breaches of competition law. The CMA has a portfolio of medicines they're considering, and they include some high-profile cases: hydrocortisone, lidocaine, and phenytoin. They name. Okay. And then there's waffle in the middle. And then they say, this is really amazing. Additionally, you point out it's on the World Health Organization list of essential medicines. The DHSC is leading a program of focusing on increasing the resilience of medicine supply chain. And underpinning this is the development of an essential medicines list in the UK. So we're going to exit Brexit, we're going to leave the World Health Organization and do our own thing. We don't need the World Health Organization and experts to tell us what we need, because we need to make our own list. And we don't know if Halipa will be on that list. Amazing, okay? So let's look into this, right? So first of all, they're quite right. The CMA do fine big companies. So Pfizer were fined 84 million for phenytoin, okay? They basically did exactly this, and they hiked the price of phenytoin by basically launching a new version of the same thing, and they were caught and they were fined, and that's in The Guardian. And the inside page of The Guardian say they feel the wrath for overcharging. This is, notice, December 2016, right? So this is when the CMA fined Pfizer £84 million. And it's also the same day, 2016, in the BBC News. But what didn't get published widely was 2 years later, they appealed and they won the appeal. So the CMA lost, okay? And the CMA fine has been quashed, and Pfizer are carrying on regardless, and the price has not fallen. This is the point, the price remains high. This is not very interesting. So it's in the Financial Times, but nowhere else, okay? But basically, they have lost. And of course, the CMA appealed, and the CMA lost the appeal 2020, okay? It was just before lockdown. So the CMA are unable, because they don't have the lawyers able to compete with the lawyers of industry, who basically laugh at them. And there's no way the CMA can keep prices down. It's the wrong route, okay? So here's my summary of the first bit. The CMA fines don't work. All the appeals are won not by the CMA, but by the opposition. And the CMA is not the way, because competition is very easy to cheat. Okay, it's very easy to do the wrong thing and then pretend you're not doing it. You know, I'll make hydrocortisone, you make phenytoin, and we won't step on each other's turf. And we're not competing, and we're not even pretending not to compete. So it's just impossible to do this. I've got some more examples. Here's T3, lidocaine sodium, in 2007, the BNF. I've got my old BNF. I'm glad I keep those paper copies of the BNF. So £4.46 in 2007, and now £161 for the same quantity. Okay, crazy pricing. So will the CM, and then not only that, they then add insult to injury by having advertising the lower strength more than half the price. It was for half the dose for more than half the price. Okay, so well done. They're fined for the rise in 6,000%, and that's on the 29th of July this year. And this is what they do, right? They say they developed a price optimization strategy. In other words, you minimize supply and maximize the cost. That's a typical, normal business school plan for any business. And it's not wrong. It's quite a good thing to do, maybe. But it's not ethical when you're talking about drugs. And of course, here we go. We're going to hit back and we're going to appeal, and they're going to win the appeal. We're in the middle of this appeal now. And I have no hope for the CMA winning this, because they're not able to prove that competition law is broken, because there's enough of the cartel together saying that they're not really a cartel at all. So now I'm going to show you what works. And this has moved us into an area of research that's quite interesting. So hydrocortisone was the first one that kicked this off, really. Okay. And just to remind you all, it's way off patent. And 70 years later, it's another drug on the World Health Organization list of essential drugs. Okay. And I dig out my old BNF, and there it is, 70 pence. Okay. You have 70 pence for a month's supply. So nice and cheap, 2007. That includes obviously a small profit for Merck, Sharp and Doe, right? I mean, they're not going to do it for nothing. So that is a little bit more than the cost. So 3 years later, you discover it's not MSD anymore. It's now non-proprietary, but this time it's £48, not 70 pence. And for 20 milligrams, £51. So you think, hello, what's going on here? How can that vast increase be possibly justified? And you think they're embarrassed. So here we are. This is in one of the open small print newspapers. And look at the title. And they're right. NHS doesn't care about the cost of medicines. Drug firms accuse profiteering by raising prices by 1,000%. And the guy who runs the company says, the NHS doesn't care. And he's right. The NHS are behind them. They're quite happy. NHS Improvement says, carry on, because we don't want you to lose out. And he says, I don't need to justify profits to anybody. So you'd think that in 2010, this embarrassing thing would make me think twice about putting the price up. But no, they put it up further to £49. Okay. And it just kept on going up. So the more publicity they got, the higher it went. Okay, and basically what happened was Auden Mackenzie, one company, got the license from MSD. And the bit that I couldn't understand was how they stopped other companies doing it. Obviously, it's corruption, right? They had a monopoly. And they kept up. This is the following year. So after embarrassing headline, it comes up now as £64 and £78. Then it comes on the front page of the Times, extortionate. This is just hydrocortisone, right? £260 million to our drug bill. Ridiculous, because we used to pay £500,000 a year, now spending 60 million a year. Okay, this is 2016. This is when it was really right to its peak. And the Telegraph's saying the same thing, 12,000% overcharged. And there's lots of bits in the newspaper from various politicians saying this is outrageous, we must stop this. And then it gets worse. Okay, it's 2016. So 2017, even higher now. Okay, £147. So that's when it peaked. So that's when I thought I must take this to Parliament. So I went and gave evidence at a Public Accounts Committee meeting. Okay. And what I didn't know was all these guys around at the back here, they're all from pharma. And this guy, Warwick Smith, he's the kind of head of the conglomerates of generic pharmaceuticals. And he was also giving evidence, the opposite of what I was saying, oh, those guys, they are worried about nothing. Most drugs are very cheap. And he quotes the ones that are cheap, like atorvastatin, and reassures government and the Public Account Committee that actually that's a storm in the teacup and there's nothing wrong. And they believe him. That was the astonishing thing. Okay. Now I realize that everyone around me was from industry apart from me. So then I thought, right, I will look through around the MHRA, and they said actually there are 4 other companies that hold the license for hydrocortisone, so they can make it if they want. So I rang them all up, and they all said, no, we don't want to compete with all. And I spoke to the chief executives, nothing in writing though, right? But I phoned them up. And they said, no, because the minute we launch hydrocortisone, the other company will cut the price and we'll lose our investment. And I said, it's £140 a month. You'll make a killing because it's only worth 70 pence, surely. And basically, Warwick Smith said the same thing. We don't want to take a risk on the falling price, because Warwick Smith said, this guy here, he said, the price will fall, there'll be competition and it'll be fine. So they all pretended they weren't interested. But I'm pretty sure they were interested, and I'll show you evidence for that too, because there must have been some other thing preventing them. So then I thought I'll start writing some evidence. So I went through all the data, and we're going to review, first of all the different steroids. And this actually, interestingly, because of its cost, it basically funded our research. That's the way I look at it. But this was in 2014, I wrote this. my summary is we should use prednisolone, which is really cheap. And I did a lot of reviews and looked at all the literature and discovered that there was no evidence that hydrocortisone was better than prednisolone. And then we started looking at it properly and discovered, having reviewed it, that our patients had a high mortality with adrenal insufficiency. And that's not because of adrenal crises, that's because of heart disease. And the real reason is that almost all our patients get too much. And that's basically because we're all a bit scared. We're all a bit scared of a crisis. And so we say, have a bit more. When you have a bad day, have a bit more. And we are over-treating all these people, okay? So, and the other thing is the timing of the dosing. So hydrocortisone is a short half-life drug. I discussed the science of this in February in a different staff round. So I'll just remind you, time of the science, go back to the politics. So this is the level of cortisol in healthy volunteers, and it rises in the early hours. It peaks at about 8, so we're doing 8 or 9 a.m. cortisol, and then it declines, okay? And it seems to depend on the circadian rhythm. And when you give it 3 times a day, and you give hydrocortisone 3 times a day, then you get a very poor circadian rhythm. You get pulses that are not at all, because it's a tablet, you take it 3 times a day. And we're now finding evidence from clock genes that these late peaks are harmful. They make you very insulin resistant, for example. And that's what we want, a nice smooth curve. And that's when we looked at prednisolone. And I don't know if Liz is here, but Liz might remember how I pretended this was a new drug, but actually prednisolone is an old drug and very cheap. The difference between prednisolone and cortisol is just that double bond there. And so we looked at its binding, and we basically thought that prednisolone would be better than hydrocortisone and really cheap. And there's our problem. If you want to research on something that's cheap, there's no funding for it. But we did set up an assay. One of our registrars in metabolic medicine has set up a prednisolone assay in order to check the levels over time. And we're now very clear that once daily prednisolone is the way forward. And we wrote this up. And we found that pred replacement is basically better than any other steroid. 2016, we published that. The dose is much lower than has been previously published. These are people with no adrenal glands, right? They only need 3 milligrams of prednisolone. And we can measure pred levels now, and it's on Cerner if you want that to happen. And Liz remembers, yes. Okay. So then I found this paper that was in Spanish with English translation. Okay, so we're not the first. This was 2004, and they said that multiple hydrocortisone doses are not basically good cortisol chronobiology. They compared it with a single morning oral dose of prednisolone, and to summarize quite a good paper, a single dose of prednisolone achieved better clinical and hormonal control than thrice daily hydrocortisone. This was in Spanish in 2004, and not seen really, but they have found the same as us, that prednisolone is about 7 times more potent than cortisol. So that means that 3 of pred is about 20 of hydrocortisone. And so these textbooks that are still being published are wrong. Okay, it's not 5. It's 3 of pred is replacement, and it's 7 times more potent. And this is still in the public domain. Okay, so there's my quick science summary that we basically need to give about 3 milligrams daily. And what I said we needed, and this is what we need data. We need evidence-based medicine. Okay. So we applied to the MHRA to do a CTIMP, and that was to compare hydrocortisone and prednisolone. In 2018, we got basically authority, it got adopted, and that basically means we can do it quite cheaply, I guess, except that we need to make some prednisolone to CTIMP, to make some hydrocortisone, and we need to make some placebo. So our study was a randomized blind crossover trial of prednisolone 3 in the morning in a single tablet, which doesn't yet exist, and then 2 placebo tablets crossed over with 10, 5, 2.5 of hydrocortisone, which is quite a common dose. We're to make it. And Faye actually one day, Faye's worked in acute medicine, was our acute physician here at Charing Cross. And she said, oh, I know. She said, I play poker with someone who might be able to help you. And so I found them and I asked them to make this, and we paid them for it. About 100K was the total grant we needed, but they basically made prednisolone, placebo, hydrocortisone, different strengths, and got the license, the CTIMP that we need, because you can't obviously give a drug But this is not the stuff that is available commercially. It's only 10 and 20, which is really expensive. And so what we then did, we thought we asked the companies, you've made it for our study. The study is ongoing. The study is on the way to showing this. Prednisone 3 milligrams daily should be the dose that we use. And that's interim. But we've also asked the company to sell it. So they said, yeah, okay then. And they basically made up a price. It was 147. They said, let's sell it for 20. Huge profit because it cost them. Well, it cost nothing because we paid the costs, right? But it's 100K. It's not millions. It's 100K. So they sold it for 20 and 40 pounds a month. And of course, the price was coming down. And so here's the bit of 2019. The DT price, this is the price that is come right down. So although the price listed was 147 pounds, it's now refound at only 79. And then it comes down to 920. So month by month, it's coming down. And this is the most recent. This is our company. I say our company, the one down in West London, Genesis Pharmaceuticals, £3.55. Now you will also notice there's some other companies that I've never heard of who said they weren't interested. They've also joined the group, and they're also competing. And down is going the price. It's not just Genesis. It's now all those companies say we're not interested in competing because we might lose some money because it's not going to be £140. They're making it at 3.55, which is still a huge markup because remember, it's 70 pence. There's now 6 companies all making hydrocortisone, according to BNF, and they're all selling it at £3.55. They all set various different prices, but they've all come down now to £3.55, and it will fall further. So here is the graph of the price over the course of time. Then we start our research study. Genesis launched a drug, and down it goes to 3.55. It's still more expensive than in France. So here's my summary, right? The price was put up over 10 years. No company was interested in competing, okay? No interest at all. Then we launch it, and then when we break the cartel, everyone's interested, and down goes the price. And on top of that, they helpfully have launched different strengths, which are not available before, cheaply. This is not high cost. This is July this year. So patients now can get all the different strengths at a very cheap price. And the NHS spend, which peaked at 60 million a year from 500,000, is now 6 million. It's still quite high, but it's on the way down. Okay, partly because of our use of prednisolone. Now, just by the way, when I ask patients if they want to go back onto hydrocortisone, they are not interested because, so we have, I guess it's been funded by this, but essentially, we've got a lot of data now on prednisolone. I think prednisolone is going to be our future and not hydrocortisone because it's actually less good. It causes more resistance to insulin, it causes more side effects, whereas despite it being really cheap, it looks like it's probably better. So price gouging is what they're talking about. And what they do is they raise the price substantially above the cost of investment due to lack of competition. And of course, the way to avoid this is to compete with them. And this is what I'm trying to get everyone to sign a petition to do, which is to actually get a subsidiary of the NHS, a bit like North West London Pathology, I guess, another group that is wholly owned by the NHS, that will make these drugs. It's not expensive. It's a con when they tell us. It's really difficult to compete because you might lose money, okay? So let's just tell you a bit more about what's happening now. So here comes the fines. This is after the event. The price has already come right down, so it's a bit late to start fining for hydrocortisone. This is 6 months ago, okay? And they say, they fine the company. The NHS has spent a fortune already, 60 million a year. Okay, so they're fine. I don't know where the fine will go, but they then say the watchdog says its decision means the NHS can sue for damages. I mean, who's going to do that? NHS improvement definitely are not interested in doing that. So that's not going to happen. So we've lost the money, and it's not going to come back despite this this large fine. In fact, they vow to appeal, and I have no hope the CMA is going to lose. Okay, they're going to lose. Now, the other group who are having a similar idea, it's not a new idea, it's an obvious thing to do, is have a non-profit manufacturer. This is the Americans. Now, of course, with Donald Trump in charge, there's no hope of that. But they also, in the New England Journal, have established a case, a very good case here for a non-profit manufacturer. It's gone nowhere because politics gets in the way. So this is what I think will work. And I think if I can get enough signatures, we'll be able to actually do it. Okay. But here's my conclusions. Old drugs have no expensive costs. There's no excuse, therefore, for companies to charge lots. You see, when they say we're discovering new things, that's not true. These are old things. And the mechanism for the UK drug tariff needs to be overhauled. And I've approached Parliament on that too. And there's no appetite for looking at it, partly because probably all the profits go to friends of the government. What we could do, of course, is check with Europe, because Europe prices are a lot lower than ours. Generally, even France, hydrocortisone never went above £1.90. But for life-saving generic drugs, we need a secure supply. It's not just the cost. We need a safe, secure supply. I mentioned insulin earlier. How much insulin do you think we make in the UK of our need? Is it 10, 20, or 30%? Well, the answer is none of the above. It's zero. We import all our insulin, okay? And we have no secure supply if the world decides to blockade us. So we need to make our own, okay? And that's why I'd like you all to sign my petition. And I think I'm on 8,000 or so now. I'll set up a link for people to remember if they can't find it. A memorable word, gouge.co.uk if you can't find it. But it's actually in the flyer for today.